the engine of my car blew up, doing 90 miles an hour in the fast lane. And I thought, I'm going to die. Then the real spiritual experience happened, which was my mind went unbelievably quiet, even more quiet than before. And there was a sense, and I can't explain it to you, Paul, that I'd always been here and that I always would be here. And that this body and this mind were a temporary thing. And there was this whole thing that had no beginning and no end, and that was what I was.
Hi everybody, welcome back to This is Powerful with me, Paul Scolford. In this podcast, I speak to some incredible people about mindset, mental health, addiction and recovery. And I share my own journey throughout these conversations. So whether you're on your own path of self-discovery, recovery or transformation, inspired by human stories of mental resilience, or supporting someone who is struggling with addiction, make sure you follow and subscribe to This is Powerful. There'll be a new episode every Thursday. In these episodes, we will be talking about drug and alcohol misuse, suicide, sexual abuse, and some other heavy topics. So please take care when listening. Today, I have a very, very special guest to me, my old acting coach, Tom Ratcliffe. From professional actor through personal hardships to ordained Buddhist priest, his service to others kept focus on his sobriety. His early encounter with Sanford Meisner in the early 90s not only reshaped his craft, but opened a lifelong journey into truth, presence, and spiritual awakening. Tom's story is one of radical compassion born from chaos. Now retired from teaching, he stands at another threshold, reflecting what it truly means to live in service, to heal, and to begin again. Tom Ratcliffe, thank you very much for coming on This is Powerful.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
I'm just going to start off with how sober are you? How many years sober?
Well, I'm going to be 60 next year. I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 25 years old, and it took me 5 years to actually get sober. I did have a glimpse of what you might call something spiritual at 25, but I really struggled to sort of back that up with action. And I think I couldn't accept that I was an alcoholic at that time. And then at the age of 30, I walked out on absolutely everything in my life. I walked out on my career. I walked out on everything in total confusion. And I walked into the Pont Street beginners meeting. And it was like the wax had been removed from my ears. And I listened in that beginners meeting and I heard everybody talk about how I felt inside. And for the first time in my life, I think I felt like I belonged in this world. And I think I'd never felt like that before. I always felt different. I always felt as if somehow there was something fundamentally different about me and everybody else. And then suddenly I realized that wasn't true. And that there were plenty of people who could entirely understand my behavior, my feelings, my thoughts, and how painful it was to be unable to control all of that. And that was the beginning of, the last, I suppose, 29 years of learning about how to live in a completely different way.
That's absolutely beautiful. Can we go back to where you're from?
Where I'm from.
How was your upbringing?
I was born in West London.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was born in West London. And I have extremely positive memories from that time. I mean, there was Mr. and Mrs. Sohol next door who were Sikhs. They'd recently come from Uganda. There was Natalie Rothstein below. There was, Kajus opposite, Madame Rita Ashker. It was a kind of multicultural. There was, Notting Hill Carnival, and, you still had rag and bone men going up and down the street, Rick Bar! All that kind of business. And I really remember that world very, very warmly indeed. Although personally, I struggled a lot. And I found it very, very difficult I was very, very shy. I mean, my father was an alcoholic, bless him. He was of the kind of quiet, depressive kind. He wasn't violent personally, but he struggled terribly with alcoholism, and he probably died about 20 years before his time. And there were already problems in my family to do with that. But I remember that world is one I loved. I grew up with the sound of steel drums, early reggae music. I remember the smell of Ashkin's supermarket, which was the kind of local Jewish sort of supermarket, the kind of herbs and spices there. I remember, there's so much that I remember from that time, sort of platform shoes and flares, and it's fantastic.
You were my acting teacher.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And in Meisner technique.
Yes.
And I've never to date, and I've traveled the world and lived in New York and LA and have different acting coaches and teachers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never met a teacher like you. And because I think I was 4 months so when I went to your class, so I was fresh out of treatment, and a friend of mine had joined your class and he said, "This guy's amazing, you got to come to this class." And I went there because I felt like I was totally and utterly lost, and I didn't want to go back to modelling. So I thought, let me just see, I've done lots of commercials and I've been asked to be an actor, but let me just see. And I don't know if you remember this, you probably had lots of students, but for me, I remember doing the first scene of being like this drunk on the stage, and how I remember it is like I prepared all the stage and I put talcum powder on the table as if it was Coke and some old marijuana stuff, and started my scene. All I see was your hand come up and go, "Stop, what are you doing?" And I felt like saying, "What do you mean? I know what I'm doing. What are you doing?" And I remember you broke your anonymity, and I think, I can't remember if I cried or not, but I felt I felt like I'd been sent to the right place. And I loved going to your class because after that day I felt the trust and support of someone that I'd never had before. And I knew I could tell you anything I wanted to tell you. And just, I think what was different between you and other teachers, there was no ego. It wasn't about you. It was about everything you offered to everybody, to the students. And it's really emotional because that taught me how to have confrontation, not have confrontation rather in the street, but how to stand up for myself when I come in, because you're quite raw when you come in sobriety, and to have conversations and to know, how do I feel? What is that feeling? What do I do with that feeling? And I remember you specifically going, there it is. What is that? This is what you do with it. And it's like, I remember going home and saying, this needs to be taught in schools. Everyone needs to know this, because it was such an awakening for me. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being such an amazing human and a teacher.
That's very kind, Paul. Thank you very much. And I can assure you there was a lot of ego going on, but I was aware of it. trying to deal with it, trying to put that to one side and really pay attention to the people in class.
On Meisner, how did you get into Meisner technique?
Look, I was a tear away from about 14 onwards, and they had to expel me from school when I was 16. Just about the only thing that I could do was act, because I could not express emotions until I pretended to be someone else on stage, at which point they could come out. If I was being someone else, somehow this whole other kind of side of me would emerge. So it was the only thing I could do. And I was involved in some very dangerous stuff. I was involved with dangerous people. It sounds crazy, but I was. And it's difficult to kind of remember just how crazy that was in my teens. And so I left home when I was 16. I got a job as a storeman at the Battle Hospital in Reading, would you believe? And I auditioned for drama school. I auditioned for Guildhall, and they told me flat out I should never be an actor because I was rubbish. And more or less. And then the Central School called me back and gave me a place. So I went to the Central School of Speech and Drama when I was 17. Everyone else was older than me. I was already a full-blown alcoholic at that time, desperately trying to hide it, doing a very bad job of hiding it. And I had alcoholism, and I had this one obsession, which was acting. And I was watching people like De Niro and, everyone, all the great American actors. And I was obsessed with that. And it was something to do with authenticity. I'd always felt like I was a fraud, like there was something wrong with me. And I wanted to do one thing right. And I needed to get to the bottom of what was this acting thing and how do you really, 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 really do this? So I think that kind of saved me at one level from dying of alcoholism. If I hadn't had that, I don't think I'd have made it out of my teens, to be honest with you. I'd have wound up dead. And I think that, so it was sort of that workaholism saved me from total immersion in the addiction. And so I've just been unbelievably blessed in my life for no reason that I can give. I've had extraordinary good fortune. In the last year of drama school, an agent picked me up. I went into her office, bless her, and I started this big sort of insane speech like, I'm not going to work for, the National Theatre because they're a bunch of so-and-sos and, I won't do this. I won't do adverts because they're for, Muppets, and I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. I will not do this. And I won't. And she said, is there anything, Tom, that you will in fact actually do? I said, I don't know. What have you got? She said, I'm going to send you up for this film. And if you get it, I'll take you on. If you don't, there's the door. So I got it.
Brilliant.
So I went straight in to a feature film with Martin Shaw, who's one of the most lovely men in this business. It brings tears to my eyes. He could see what I was. He'd been through that before. He kept his counsel, but he was incredibly kind. He showed me how to deal with it. He did his best to kind of wake me up in a gentle way, but I wasn't ready. But I couldn't have had a better first job because he was so kind, so gentle. Ian Sears as well. Who was wonderful, and he tried, he tried to save me as well, but he couldn't save me. He had to boot me out of his house eventually because I was just too much of a barbarian in those days. But for several years, I tried to find some way of being authentic in my acting, and it was never quite, even though the career was going well, I was totally dissatisfied with what I was doing. I knew there was something missing. I eventually, cut a quite long story short, I met an actor who'd recently trained with Sanford Meisner. When I was in scenes with this guy, I was brilliant and I didn't know why. He was doing something. It was totally different from any other actor I've been with. He was doing something that made me better and I didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. And, we began talking and he introduced me to the Meisner exercises. He played the voice of Sanford Meisner teaching. And the moment I heard that voice, something inside me said, I've got to train with this guy. I know this is what I've been looking for. And I've been to all kinds of classes and it hadn't worked. And I knew he didn't want to train English actors. So I'd heard that. He said English actors, but just, he said, well, they're just chronically, emotionally and sexually repressed, and it's probably true. But, he'd thrown loads of them out and he couldn't be bothered. So I wrote what Sandy called the essay. I wrote this long thing saying, I'm desperate to train with you. And then I got a call from his partner, Jim. He said, it's okay. Sandy says you can come. And I was like, okay. So I went and it had enormous significance for me because, again, long story short, it was towards the end of that period that someone sat me down and said, Tom, you're an alcoholic. If you carry on like this, you're going to die. In Los Angeles. Wow. And people have said this to me before, and I said what you can imagine I might have said, which I won't repeat. But suddenly it was like being shot through the head with a bolt of light. I went, my God, you're right. And it was something to do with Sandy's unbelievable honesty in the class. It had woken up something emotional in me that I knew I couldn't handle, but was incredibly authentic. I was beginning to act as myself
Mm.
I can't quite explain, first he would open you up as a human being, and then he'd show you how to use that. And I realized if I don't do something about this, I'm going to die, and B, I'll never realize what I want to realize as an artist. It's never going to happen. Something drastic has to change. And then I came back to England, and I went straight to work. I was sitting in the Winnebago, having the old, slap put on, next to a fabulous old actor, and I John Forgem, what a guy. And I was talking to the makeup guy, saying, I need to give something up. I don't know whether it should be the fags or the booze. And this voice from the side said, I'd give up the booze if I was you, son. And I was like, oh yeah. And he said, come with me. And he walked me around, and he talked to me about himself, and he became my first sponsor.
Wow.
He got me down on my knees. I did step 3 without understanding what the hell I was doing. I then got a theatre tour in Ireland. So I went, John, I've got this theatre tour in Ireland. He went, pub crawl. And I went, no, John, theatre tour. He said, no, Tom, pub crawl. I said, well, what are you saying? He said, don't do it. Stay here, work on your recovery. So, of course, I started driving up to Holyhead to go for the theatre tour, pub crawl. And it was on that drive that I had my first vital spiritual experience. I suddenly had this thought, maybe everything that I think I know is just a thought in my head, and I actually don't know anything at all. And then there was a kind of sudden experience of total silence in my mind, just complete and utter silence. And in that silence, there was a kind of bliss which I could not describe, and it was like something I'd forgotten from very early childhood. I'd sort of forgotten this. And then the thought came into my mind, maybe this is this spiritual experience that all those nutters in the rooms have been talking about. And then the old voice came out, nah, come on, blah, blah, blah. And then this is the bit that you'll just have to take this on trust. But the engine of my car blew up, doing 90 miles an hour in the fast lane. And I thought, I'm going to die. And there was this really cool thought, which was just like, well, I'd always wondered how I was going to die. And now I know. This is it. I died on the motorway up to Holyhead. And I didn't die. I got onto the hard shoulder. The car didn't explode any further. I mean, what had happened was, being an alcoholic, I hadn't put any water or oil in the car for God knows how long. And the engine block had cracked, So I got out of the car, and then the real spiritual experience happened, which was my mind went unbelievably quiet, even more quiet than before. And there was a sense, and I can't explain it to you, Paul, that I'd always been here and that I always would be here. And that this body and this mind were a temporary thing. And there was this whole thing that had no beginning and no end, and that was what I was. And for 2 days I wandered around in that state, met people, not a hint of suffering anywhere. I walked in the rain to the station, the car, nothing mattered. Everything was fine. The world was a beautiful place. That faded away. Tried going to AA in Northern Ireland, didn't work. Got back on the piss, and I didn't come back properly for 5 years. But I started spiritually seeking at that point. I went looking. And I went through this terrible period of the binge drinking period, where I would go on spiritual retreats. I managed to get some kind of glimpse of this. And then I'd come out and be totally powerless against alcohol again. And sooner or later I'd go on a binge. And that went on for 5 years and brought me to a place of profound despair.
Wow.
Out of which, I managed to finally get on the 12-step program and go for it.
Do you feel that was like almost like a little hand of God to say, you can be this peaceful in your life? You there's something else here. And do you think that when you said it faded away, the curiosity was for the spirituality, but not to give up the drink?
You got two things at work. I think everyone, every single creature, person, everything in this world is spiritual. It's not like there's spirituality over there somewhere and sort of non-spirituality over here. Everything is. We lose sight of that because we get obsessed with this thing, that thing, money, sex, power, booze, alcohol, drugs, envy, you name it. Everyone's obsessed with something, you know. And we're trying to find happiness and fulfillment through all these things, you know, and that's going on all around us. That's the world. But behind that, everyone, essentially, we're all utterly, completely, absolutely equal.
Yeah.
We're equal. Now, it's not that it faded away. It's that the noise in my head got louder again. And the old desires and delusions and things, the idea that I kind of owned it. I thought, oh, I've had this spiritual experience, and the ego got going. I want this, me. And I thought I could sort of have and own and sort of control the spiritual, that it was a possession of mine. I didn't realize that that's the one thing you can never possess, because it is what you are. It's what you are. You can't own what you are. You can only own what you're not, and not even that, really. I mean, I know this sounds like strange, crazy talk, but there it is. I mean, I think the spiritual experience kind of cuts against everything that we think is important. It shows us something. I mean, you know, every spiritual sort of teacher has struggled to be understood in this world, because they're talking about something which makes no sense in terms of the usual things that people want, you know, which doesn't mean that people can't have money, family, success, good food. There's nothing wrong with these things. What's wrong with these things is the idea that they're going to fix your problem as a person. No. You otherwise every millionaire would be happy, and we know perfectly well this is completely not the case.
When did you realize that you had alcoholism, Tom?
That's an interesting question, because I think I knew quite early on, because I was putting my dad to bed when I was 8, and I knew something was horribly wrong. But that's more of an emotional thing. It wasn't grasped intellectually that something was. I mean, I, as a child, I would look at other people and go, well, why don't you drink like me? I thought other people who drank moderately were just like, you know, lightweights, you know, I mean, like they didn't know how to drink properly, you know, idiots, you know. Don't you know you're supposed to sort of wind up face down in your own vomit? And, you know, I mean, you know, don't you know you're supposed to get leery and have a fight with that you can't finish, you know? I mean, don't you know that's what it's all about? I mean, I romanticized alcoholism. You know, I mean, there was a lot of that around. It was, you know, Shane MacGowan and the Pogues and the punk movement. That was my generation. And I'm not knocking it, because there was a lot of stuff around that was sincere and beautiful. And, you know, I mean, people like Shane, he was a genius in terms, but he was also, you know, we lived this life around that kind of Camden Town nutty kind of stuff going on, rebels and all this kind of thing. And it was romanticized. But I honestly, the truth is, I didn't think I'd make it out in my 20s. You know, I mean, I just kind of accepted that as the price I was going to pay for this lifestyle I was leading. And I didn't question it, really. And I think in a sense, it wasn't until I had a glimpse of something outside of that world that I could compare that world to, when I looked back at that world and realized how insane it was. So when did I realize? I realized I probably always knew, but I was failing to recognize what that truly meant.
Yeah.
And I think it was only when I was sitting there in Los Angeles at the age of 25 that I realized what that meant, that I really was going to die, and not in a good way. And I think the other thing was I realized the damage that I was doing to other people. And I think that was really the thing which horrified me. I look back and I'm like, oh my God. You know, and I saw the trail of wreckage. I saw how little I cared about other people. I saw the gross self-centeredness, everything was justified because I'd suffered this way or that way, therefore, and then I completely failed to recognize that every single human being on this planet struggles and suffers in some way, some in most horrendous ways, much worse than me, and that it's not about whether we suffer or not. It's about how we deal with the fact that we do suffer. That's the crux of it.
So you started to do AA in LA?
No, I started in England. I didn't go to
England.
a meeting there.
Right.
It was when I came back. It was just when I met. I went to a couple and it didn't quite. And then when I met John.
Did you carry on acting whilst going through a 12-step program, or did you? Did you change into a teacher?
Yeah. When I quit at 30, I quit everything. I walked out on acting. I walked out on everything. I got a job on a building site initially. Then I went sideways into landscape gardening. It also coincided with the birth of my daughter, Sophie.
Yeah.
Bless you, dear. And I just quit. I did exactly what my first sponsor had told me 5 years before. I just stopped all the nonsense. I never thought I'd go back to acting, and I just took regular jobs. And so I went from being a labourer to being a landscape gardener to working in a department store in London. They promoted me to the store manager, basically because I was an actor and I could sound like I knew what I was doing. And that's what do actors do? They sound like they know what they're talking about when they don't. I mean, that's your basic skill, isn't it? Now, how you do that is another matter. How you do that convincingly is another matter. But fundamentally, that's what you do. And then I went from there. I wanted to do something meaningful. So I went to work for Lewisham Council as an outreach worker, which was an extraordinarily profound part of my life. I worked with people with mental health problems and learning disabilities, and met some absolutely extraordinary people, and really understood, some people just are dealt some very bloody difficult cards in life. I'm glad we live in a society that at least has some recognition that people need a helping hand, because some people do, and that's life. It really is true. People were there when I needed it, and I need my hand to be there when other people need it. And, that's the reality of being a human being in this world. So I learned a lot from that. And I got to a point where I burnt out with that job. Some people are amazing and they can do that job all their life, but it takes some, strength to do that. Strength that I honestly didn't have, Paul. That's the truth. I wasn't strong enough to do that job forever, but it taught me a lot. And then somebody said, my girlfriend's just been on a long-running TV series. She's come off it and she needs to go on stage, and she's terrified of going on stage because if you forget your lines on stage, you're stuffed. You used to be this great acting teacher guy. He was a guy who'd worked with me before. He said, will you help her out? And I said, well, I don't do that anymore, actually. He said, oh, go on. I went, oh, all right then, look, she can get a partner. I'll show her how it works. So I started teaching her and an actress friend of hers, and I just loved it. And I found that my ability to teach had grown massively through 7 years of not doing it, but engaging with people from a completely different place, not as a teacher, but, at ground level. And somehow the sort of empathy with people was much, 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 much deeper now that I really didn't give a damn about acting or career or any of that, which I never did again, to be honest with you. But I loved the fact that it worked, that she was able to go on stage, she was able to be herself, she was able to do a good job. And I just loved that. I loved the fact that she was able to do that, and that something about the way that we interacted allowed that to happen. So then that led, long story short, that led on to more and more offers of acting, and finally I just migrated from social work to acting teaching, which I did right up until a year ago. The real reason why I stopped was, I think, for some years I've been getting frustrated with it. I felt confined or limited by the the fact of being an acting teacher. That people come into class who, they wanted to make it in the business, and there's nothing wrong with that. They had a lot of ambitions, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine to have that. But really what interested me, and this sounds pretentious, and maybe it is, but was liberating people emotionally, getting people to a place where they could see who they were and decide for themselves how they wanted to use who they were. A lot of actors are acting with a fraction of who they are. A lot of people in life are living with a fraction of who they are. And what I was interested in was, getting people to be entirely who they were, and then fine, do with that what you will. And I trust if someone is working from that authentic place, whatever they do will be good. Doesn't matter what it is. That was what I was interested in, and the whole confines of the business and having to get,
You mean, just to say people who are not in the business or anything like that, all the stuff that comes with it, that's
all the
bullshit
stuff that comes with it,
instead of the art of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The art as opposed to the business.
Yeah.
And
they're completely different.
I felt constrained by the business side of it, not for myself, but from other people. And then I had I'll just be really, really honest. I had a particularly beloved student, someone I really identified with his struggle to be good at the craft of acting. He worked incredibly hard. He was extremely talented, somewhat fragile emotionally, and he went into psychosis beginning of last year. I and other people tried so hard to get him out of it, and cut a long story short, he wound up taking his own life. And on the very day that I heard that news, I knew that I was not going to teach again. I can't quite explain why, but I went, it's over. It's finished. I wasn't able to help. And I think also I came to this thing. It's like, in AA we claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Now, let's forget about spiritual perfection, but I've really realized that in a sense I'd stopped making spiritual progress myself, that my focus had been outwards for years. I'd spent a lot of time with my focus outwards. I'd done charity work and all kinds of things, and that my focus was out there on other people's development, and that there was this frustration that I built up that somehow I'd stopped progressing, that I was hearing myself saying things that I'd said for years and they were hollow now. It didn't have meaning for me anymore, although it may possibly have had meaning for other people. And I think it stopped me in my tracks, and I realized I needed to turn my attention inwards and make spiritual progress myself, that I was stuck spiritually. And I think, as you grow spiritually, as your own suffering diminishes, your awareness of the suffering in the world around you grows. It was always there, but because there's less noise in your head, you see it all around the world, and everyone you meet, it's there. And okay, there's me getting spiritually happier, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is, can I help the people around me? Can I contribute to the world? Can I make a difference in this world? Because when I go, I take nothing with me. It's all over. I'm just going to get old. I'm going to get sick. I'm going to die. That's it. That's the reward you get. Now, sure, I do believe absolutely that something comes after and something came before, and I don't know what they are. It's a gut feeling, more than a gut feeling. It's an absolute conviction. But that's not the point. Is what are we here to do? Am I here to accumulate stuff? Am I here to get something? And it makes no sense anymore. So I realized that I wanted to be able to contribute to other people was more than I was able to do at the time, and that in order to move into a new phase of my life, I had to let go. Now, it wasn't that was a decision. That decision was made for me, as just about every other decision in my life has been made for me. Life decided for me. And somehow that terrible death just cut it. And then it was interesting. My family went into meltdown, and I had to turn my attention there. And if I'd still been, I'd have had to quit teaching anyway, because my family needed me at that point, because I'm not the only addict in my family. So life, at the time, it always seems like it's chaos and madness, but when you look back, it's absolutely perfect and precise. Every moment of my life has been perfect and precise, and everything that's happened, however painful, has been a blessing. That's how I look at it.
To look at it in that way, in my understanding, can only be someone who's done a lot of deep self work, coming from a place where you're self-centered, you know, and your view on life is just being a rebel and taking what you can and whatever, almost like just running and booting the door and go, come on. It's such a shift. It's such a journey. And if you did a 12-step program and then you got the meditation, how does that merge? Like, why does someone who has alcoholism have to go to a 12-step program or AA? Why can't they just do the other stuff? Because a lot of people try to fast track and find themselves over here.
I mean, I think when I first kind of began meditating, I was trying to get something. I was trying to acquire something. I applied the sort of old ideas to it, that I was going to become more powerful, or I was going to be able to read minds, or I was going to, you know, I was looking, because that's the logic of, you know, most of life is, what am I going to get? You know, and so when we first, you know, get a glimpse of the spiritual world, we apply the same logic. What am I going to get? And it makes perfect sense, you know, and it's an innocent mistake where people go, oh, well, I've done all this, I made a mess over here, I'm going to go over there and sort of acquire some spirituality. But I think, as I was saying earlier, that spirituality is not a thing you can acquire. It's the one thing you cannot buy. You are already spiritually complete. We just can't believe that, because we've been such absolute bloody fools and done this. It's impossible to believe at first that you are complete, pure and perfect as you are. And yet that is what I've come to understand is the case. Now, my ability to live from that place is limited by my tendency to get obsessed with self-centered projects. And I think it doesn't just, I mean, the revelation that there's something more to life than that can come to anyone at any time. A lot of people have those experiences, but then it's the work to remove the other obsessions. If you don't do that, well, that's your side of the bargain in a way. You know, the spiritual experience is God-given, and I'm unbelievably blessed to have been given it many times. That had nothing to do with me. I didn't earn it in any way that I can see. Just, I don't know why. I'm just very grateful for it. But the work that you have to do to be able to live out that understanding is daily, incredibly challenging. You fail constantly. You have to face up to your weakness, and you've got to look in the mind in minute detail and see, you know, it's not about, oh, I'm this and I'm spiritual, I'm a bit fine, whatever. It's being honest about, no, I hate very easily. I get envious very easily on a daily basis. You know, I get greedy, I get gluttonous, I get, you name any deadly sin, I do it every single day. Now, the question is, am I aware that I'm doing it, and do I know what to do about it when those things arise? And the answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. And it's a question of, you know, possibly, you know, the fastest spiritual recoveries I've seen have often been in the people who seconds before it happened, you'd never have guessed that it was going to happen because they were in such a bad way. But it's the fact that they were in such a bad way, they look back and go, I never want to go there again. And therefore they'll do the work. Now, certainly in my case, that's it. And in the case of a lot of other people I know, fear of going back there won't do it. But fear of going back there plus a glimpse of, you know, the spiritual dimension, whatever you want to call it, and then being blessed with finding one thing I've always been blessed with in this life, and I don't know why, is great teachers. I had the best acting teacher in the world. I've had some incredibly good sponsors, and I've sought out and found some great meditation teachers and spiritual guides, and I still have them, and I'll have them till the day I die, because I know that I can't do it without being able to consult someone who knows more about this than me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I let go of that, I'm flying alone, and I can make some terrible mistakes, and the head can get big and the ego can come back and all the rest of it. So in a way, it's not about acquiring this thing called spirituality. It's about getting rid of the madness, the self-centeredness, and selfishness and madness are actually the same thing. There's no difference. Madness is just a variation of extreme self-centeredness, in my view.
And just someone I learned a lot of meditation. There's a misunderstanding that meditation, I thought, was that I need to clear my mind and then I'll be totally fine after. Can you tell me what is meditation?
Oh, well, I've been attempting to answer that question for 30 years, Paul, more or less. Well, 29 years. It means a lot of different things to different people. So what I say is entirely from my own personal experience, and it's not a definitive answer, because it can't be, For me, there's many different forms of meditation, but the most basic form is it's a way of getting honest with yourself. And getting in touch with a part of you that is not related to any of the things you may have done in the past, which you find difficult to deal with. And it includes all those things. So it's the ability, within sobriety, we go through hell sometimes within sobriety. What sobriety gives us is the ability to go through hell without becoming so distorted that we act out in ways that damage ourselves and others. But we do go through pain. Pain is in fact necessary. Meditation gives you the mental strength to sit with pain until you're able to accommodate it, not get rid of it, because you never get rid of it. Even if you get rid of your personal pain, it's going to hurt that other people suffer. That's never going to not be the case. And if it is, something's wrong. This world is full of pain, and you're never going to be free from that. But you might develop the strength to be able to deal with that in a way which is positive. And I remember a very difficult period in sobriety where I was trying to do what in the 12 steps we call handing over to God, or handing over to the higher power, or whatever you want to call it. And I couldn't do it. There was a pain inside. It wasn't shifting, it wasn't going anywhere. And I didn't do any of the things my mind was telling me to do to get rid of it. I just sat on my bed and I just kept sitting there. And I just kept sitting there with this pain. And at one point I got into the fetal position, on the bed, just like, oh God. And it wouldn't go. And then very quietly, it wasn't even really a voice, but it was a kind of feeling from within that just said, it said it, I think, give it to me. And it wasn't like something outside myself. It was the deepest part of myself. And suddenly it was like everything went to reverse, and I was looking at Tom, who was suffering. And I wasn't suffering. He was. And there was a total love for that poor little fella called Tom. And that suffering was perfectly all right, because I could handle it. Now, I don't know who that I is, but I know that everyone is that I. You're that I, I'm that I, everyone is this. It's not, I don't know, but that if you keep going with this, things happen, and they happen to you. And it's about what meditation does is it gives you the strength that when the pain hits, you don't go mental. Even if you do go mental, you don't act on the mental thoughts. You sit there and you deal with it. If you can sit there long enough, something will arise from inside that can cope with it. And it just gradually expands your ability to deal with suffering. It doesn't get rid of suffering. That's the biggest mistake that people can make with meditation. It doesn't get rid of suffering. It removes your terrified, self-centered fear around suffering, and you begin to be able to embrace it. I mean, if I have never suffered, how the hell can I help you with your suffering? And you begin to realize every time I'm able to deal with my own suffering, I learn more about how to help you deal with yours, you know. And sometimes that's just by being very, very silent and listening to someone fully. And in that process, if I know that, you know, whatever healing there's been in my life has not been my doing, it's come to me through being very, very honest, then all I need to do is sit there in silence and it will come to that person too. I can't really give advice. You know, maybe that's one of the reasons I had to quit being a teacher. I fed up with giving advice. And I need to find a more invisible way of being here for people, I think.
For those who are listening, Tom, they don't understand what alcoholism is. What's alcoholism in your view?
What I know for certain is that when I picked up alcohol properly for the first time at 14, I experienced a total psychic change once I began drinking beyond a certain point. I'd had sips of this and sips of that, but I had my first proper drink. Up to that point, I'd been shy to the point that I couldn't talk to anyone. In my head, I'd just be calculating whether what I said was going to be okay or not, and I usually decided not, and was this kind of. I was sent to a child psychologist when I was 12 because I didn't laugh, I didn't cry, I expressed no emotion, and most of the time I didn't speak. I remember people would tell jokes, and I prided myself on my ability to know that it was funny, feel like laughing and not. And just stare at them with a look on my face that said, there is nothing funny about life. So that's the way I was. When I picked up a drink, suddenly I could talk to everyone. I could make up outrageous lies about who I was and how I felt, and sort of suddenly become briefly popular. I had the courage to challenge other guys to a fight and get right in there. First drink I had, I came to vomiting into the toilet at home with my dad saying, "You're a man now." And that was a mark of manhood. Second good drink I had, I wound up in A&E with my nose over the other side of my face, with a huge sense of exhilaration because I'd taken on a guy bigger and stronger than me, and I'd just fucking gone for it. It beat the hell out of me, but I'd gone for it. And then from that point on, I went to the local karate club. I went to the local boxing. I wanted to get big and strong and alcoholic and fight. And, I wound up at the age of 16 standing outside someone's front door with a lead-filled pipe up my sleeve, waiting for him to open the door, and I was going to cosh him with it. And I had one of the most important moments of my life, which went, if I do that, my life goes that way. And if I don't do that, my life goes, I'm not going to do it. I walked away. But I reached this point of insanity in 2 years, from 14 to 16. I'd become someone who was capable of killing another human being or maiming them. Now, what is alcoholism? It's a form of absolute insanity. That from the moment I picked up that drink, I had absolutely no control over what happened next. And a totally different personality emerged, which has nothing to do with who I really am. I mean, it was like every demon in me got together and created a person who just created absolute mayhem wherever he went. And the speed with which that happened was unbelievable. I became absolutely ungovernable almost immediately. And my school career was over. I would make friends and lose them in weeks, I'd be very, very charming one minute, and then several weeks later I'd have stolen from them, lied to them, maybe even attacked them, tried to sort of, get into bed with their partner. I mean, unbelievable, just horrendous ways of dealing with it. I mean, and by the time I got into the program, the shame that I had about the way that I had treated other people was, now, to me, alcoholism is, why, I don't know, but it is that some people have that reaction to alcohol. There is an extreme change when they begin to drink. Drugs came along with it, everything came along with it. That things that, you wouldn't have dreamt of doing the day before, suddenly the door opened to all of it. And the thinking became completely twisted, and everything became about justifying that lifestyle to myself and other people. If you're powerless over alcohol and your life is unmanageable, you are an alcoholic. Period. Now, while you're asking why, you might die. So what you need to know is that that's the problem you're in, and there's a way out of it, and you need to do certain things. Now, the steps are, do this, your mind will clear, and you'll be able to look back and maybe have some clarity and some understanding about what the hell went on and how you got there. There's a great story that is in one of the Buddhist sutras where somebody goes to the Buddha and says, so who was your teacher? And how did you learn meditation? And what is meditation? And is the world eternal? And is it, and the Buddha said, look, I'm going to tell you a little story. There's this man, he's shot in the eye with an arrow. And the doctor comes along and he says, look, before you take the arrow out, where did you train? Who was your family? How often have you done this before? The man is going to die before that arrow comes out. So just take the instructions given by someone who's beat the problem of alcoholism, and later on you can ask all those questions and figure it out. But first you need to get out of the hole, because the thinking is insane. Step 2 is, came to believe that only a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Now, that means you have to admit that you're crazy. There's no point with a crazy mind in trying to figure out what's wrong with you. It's not going to work. You need to get uncrazy first. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole 12 steps, but the whole 12 steps are a way of getting uncrazy, unburdening that shame and that guilt and that crashing, awful sense of there being something deeply and irrevocably wrong with you. Once you get to the other side of that, or at least to some extent, you might begin to be able to pick up the pieces and see how you might have got there. And, I'm loath to give opinions about why, because then people start arguing about why. Is it this? Is it that? Is it? Doesn't matter. What's the way out? That's the important thing.
Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
This is Powerful is brought to you by Stride Foundation. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please head over to www.stridefoundation.com, where you can find links to resources that may help. You can also donate. Please make a donation. It will help us bring to you more episodes. Please rate, follow, and subscribe to the show. Why? This will help the algorithm make us more visible to others who need help. And share this podcast with your family, friends. Head over to social media at Paul Scolfort and at this_is_powerful. You'll get to see what's coming up, and you can get in touch with us because I love hearing about you. Thank you also to my beautiful wife, Dr. Federica Amati. The best producer, Shannon Delwich, to Ebba Long, who does all the hard work in the background. Thank you also to Rian Musa and the rest of the team. Hi everybody, I'd really love to hear your views so that we can produce a podcast with the content that matters to you. It doesn't matter if you just joined us or if you've been listening from the start. We would love you to fill in the short listener feedback form, which you can find in the show notes. And let me know your thoughts on our podcast. It would really mean a lot. Thanks, guys.